All you need to know about the LA Kings' 4 recent draft picks on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years, the Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast. It's a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, the Kings wrapped up the NHL draft over this past weekend, but because of the start of free agency on Monday, we had to obviously focus on that and give it the attention it deserved, but we still needed to recap the Kings' entire NHL draft, and we decided we are going to do that on today's show. So at the 2014 NHL draft in Las Vegas, which looked really cool, by the way, I wish I would have been able to get out there and check out the Sphere. I am going to be out in Vegas on August the 3rd, so hopefully I'll check out the Sphere and all the sights and sounds then, but it looked like everyone that I know that did go had a great time and thought it looked really, really cool. Anyway, the Kings would end up with 4 picks in the 2014 NHL draft. There were some wheeling and dealing that went along, but in the end, the Kings got a first-round pick, a second-round pick, a sixth-round pick, and a seventh-round pick. Now, we did talk a bit about the Kings' first-round pick, Liam Greentree, in our show last Friday, but I did want to touch on him a little bit again today. Now, everything I have read since about Liam Greentree is pretty much the exact same thing from scouts and draft analysts. Nothing but great things to say about every aspect of his game, except one. He's not a great skater. And to me, I say, who cares? Honestly, he scores goals. He sets up teammates to score goals, and he's a solid defensive player. He's a good all-around player. Is it really that big of a deal about how he gets from point A to point B if his stride isn't the classic stride? Don't get me wrong. Maybe they're saying you can kind of get away with that at the lower levels, but at the NHL level, that's something that has to be better. But I said this on Friday's show. They said Luc Robitaille was a terrible skater, and all he did was turn into the highest scoring left winger in NHL history until some guy named Alexander Ovechkin came along and is a hockey Hall of Famer. So I tend to think that kind of stuff is overrated personally. Of course, they do need to find something to talk about as far as a negative. But in the end, it seems like Liam Greentree was a great pick. And apparently the skating was the reason why he fell to number 26, which certainly is great for the Kings. So checking some of the more well-known scouts and draft analysts as far as where they had Liam Greentree ranked going into the draft, Elite Prospects, Ryan Kennedy from the Hockey News, and Sportsnet's Sam Constantino all had him ranked 15th. Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News had him 16th. Scott Pakula from Sportsnet had him 17th. Bob McKenzie of TSN 18th. The Daily Faceoff had him 19th. And TSN's Craig Button had him 23rd. Of the 18 scouts or draft analysts that had Liam Greentree ranked, only one of them had him ranked higher than 26, where the Kings selected him. Everyone else had him ranked 23rd or lower, and most of them had him in the high teens. His average ranking was 17, and the Kings got him again at number 26. So I mentioned this on Friday's show, talked about the skating is something that I think he can improve on and has said he is addressing it. It's something he knows he needs to get better at, and it is something he's focusing on. Now, you could argue, he also apparently he played on a really bad team in juniors. And you could argue that a lot of his great numbers were because he had to do most of the heavy lifting himself and took most of the shots. But you could also argue, how good could his numbers be if he wasn't the sole focus of the other team defensively and he had some good teammates to actually help him elevate his game? So It seems like Liam Greentree was a very good pick for the LA Kings in the 20s, and they even traded back and still landed him. As far as the rest of the draft for the Kings, with their second selection, 57th overall, the Kings took goaltender Carter George. Now, I was surprised by this pick a little bit. We think Eric Portillo might be the future in net for the Kings, probably the near future, right, in net, but we still won't know that probably until at least next season. And I've also talked about how high I am on Hampton Slukinski. I think he is the long-term future for the LA Kings, but he's still several years away. If Portillo doesn't work out, they have him. And it's never a bad thing to have depth at all positions in your organization. But I do wonder if this pick by the Kings is them maybe hedging their bets a little bit. Maybe they're hopeful about Portillo and Slukinski, but not completely sold. So they were looking for maybe another potential number one goalie down the line if things don't work out with Portillo or Slukinski. We'll see. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they just wanted some depth in the organization. Maybe he was just the best player available at that position. But anyway, as for Carter George, he's 18, 6'1", 185 pounds. Last season playing in the Ontario Hockey League for the Owen Sound Attack, he had a record of 23, 21, and 6 with a 3.30 goals against average and a 907 save percentage. He had 4 shutouts in his first season in juniors. He was 0-4 in the playoffs, 4.08 goals against average and a 904 save percentage. However, he was still selected to the OHL's all-rookie team and the team's third all-star team. But the big thing for Carter George, and what put him on the map, was his 6-0 record for Team Canada as he backstopped that team to the gold medal at the under-18 World Championships. In that event, his goals against average was 2.33 and his save percentage was 916. Now, he was ranked as high as 98th and as low as 41st by the rankings. Of the 15 scouting rankings that he had, his average rank was 67, and the Kings got him at 57. As for what they say about Carter George, Elite Prospects said, quote, "The immediate thing that will jump out to you about Carter George is his puck handling ability. He is as confident as they come and will constantly send his team on breakouts with stretch passes. He doesn't panic when pressured. He makes smart, quick plays when his options are limited. On top of his exceptional puck handling ability, George has a solid technical foundation to fall back on." End quote. That was what Elite Prospects had to say about Carter George. It was also interesting to note that George actually grew up an LA Kings fan, even though he is from Canada, because he was apparently a huge fan of Jonathan Quick. Carter George said about being drafted by the Kings, quote, "This was a dream of mine since I've been a kid, growing up a huge LA Kings fan. I've always dreamed of wearing the jersey and playing for them. It's pretty cool to get drafted by this organization. It's just a dream for me," end quote. So obviously very, very cool to actually get a player who dreamed about playing for the LA Kings. It doesn't necessarily mean he's going to play any harder or any better, but it's just cool to know that that is just another layer on the story of goaltender Carter George. Big Kings fan. Hopefully one day we see him doing well wearing that LA Kings uniform in Los Angeles. So those are the Kings' first 2 picks. Up next, we look at the Kings' final 2 picks in the 2014 NHL draft. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up any bets that I want to, that I'm in the mood for. Major League Baseball, golf, soccer, NASCAR, and it's never too early to get some bets down on how your favorite NFL team is going to do for the upcoming season. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sports betting is not yet legal in California. However, you can still sign up at FanDuel, browse the latest betting odds to your favorite sports and teams on the Sportsbook app, and get in on the action from anywhere with their free games featuring real cash prizes. No matter where you are in the Golden State, there'll be plenty of options to back the underdog or the favorite when sports betting becomes available. Of course, if you're listening to this show or watching the show elsewhere, you can certainly get in on the fun. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Well, the LA Kings wrapped up their 2024 NHL draft with a sixth and a seventh round pick. And it's easy to dismiss these picks, but the Kings have actually done really well with their later round picks. The Kings signed their 2022 seventh round pick, left winger Caleb Lawrence, to a 3-year entry level deal recently. They wouldn't do that unless they feel that he had some real potential. Same for 2020 seventh round pick, left winger Otto Jemsen, who also recently signed. Both will be playing for the Ontario Reign next season. Lawrence has been playing in juniors, and Jemsen was over in Finland. Andre Lee was a seventh round pick by the Kings in 2019, and he's seen as a possible dark horse to be on the Kings' fourth line this season. And most famously, Matt Roy was the Kings' seventh round pick in 2015. He not only turned into a very solid NHL defenseman, but he just got a 6-year, $34.5 million free agent contract with the Washington Capitals. Not bad for a seventh round draft pick. So with that in mind, we are not going to dismiss the Kings' sixth and seventh picks. And I really like both these selections. In the sixth round, the Kings, with the 164th selection, picked defenseman Jared Woolley. He's 18 years old, 6'5", 210 pounds. Last season was his first season in the OHL with the London Knights. In 37 games, he had 3 goals and 2 assists for 5 points. In 16 playoff games, he had a goal and 2 assists for 3 points. Elite Prospects describes Jared Woolley as, quote, defensively overpowering. He throws big hits at the blue line, beats down opponents in front of his net, sets picks and traps attackers along the boards. In transition, he's always looking for the high-value breakout pass and deceives opponents to get it. He joins rushes, walks in space before firing, and tries to set up chances around the slot. End quote. Ryan Kennedy from the Hockey News posted on X about Woolley, quote, LA gets one of my sleeper picks in Jared Woolley, a big competitive D-man. All you need to know is Dale Hunter trusts him already. End quote. Ryan Kennedy had him ranked 98th, and the Kings got him at 164. And by the way, if you don't know who Dale Hunter is, I think he's the owner and head coach, maybe the GM as well, of the London Knights, which is one of the more respected junior teams in the world. Former NHL player, and if he trusts Jared Woolley, and that means he puts him in any big situations on the ice, that's obviously saying a lot for a guy who knows his hockey, so to speak. So an endorsement from former NHL player Dale Hunter. With the final pick, the LA Kings, in the 7th round, 198th selection, chose forward James Reeder. The 18-year-old is 5'10", 180 pounds. He's a right winger. Last season played for the Dubuque Fighting Saints in the United States Hockey League. In 53 games, he had 20 goals and 40 assists for 60 points. And he is committed to play next season at the University of Denver, which is the reigning NCAA men's hockey champ. So obviously joining one of the top U.S. college hockey programs around. Elite Prospects said about James Reeder, quote, high-paced, dynamic winger who fearlessly drives the middle. His give and goes in his play, shifting the defense before passing to create more space for his target. He fakes before cutting inside, cuts back, and uses the trailer. And if all else fails, his pace and motor allow him to outrace the defense, end quote. Of the 5 rankings that James Reeder received from scouts and analysts, his average ranking was 164, and the Kings got him at 198. So what do the experts give the Kings 2024 draft class as far as a grade? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you are looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Well, I wanted to take a look at what a few of the scouts and draft analysts had to say about the Kings' entire draft class and give it a grade. The most comprehensive one I found was from Corey Pronman of The Athletic. I would encourage you, if you can, to check out the entire article. There's a lot there. But as far as some of the highlights, Pronman said about Liam Greentree, is a good prospect who has a chance to score in the NHL and might be a legit middle six winger. I actually mocked him to the Kings when they had the number 21 pick, as I thought he was a fit for the kind of player they like, adding some size and skill to their forward group. Carter George is a small goalie, but he had a very strong showing in the OHL. And at the under 18s, that's my ringtone. I never get tired of that ringtone. Sorry to interrupt with that, but we were saying Carter George. Why was my phone not on vibrate? I do not know. Carter George is a small goalie, but had a very strong showing in the OHL and at the under 18s for Canada. Looks like he has a real chance to make it despite his frame. He's a very quick goaltender with a twitch in his lower half to easily get across the crease. He often reads the play very well and squares up a lot for pucks. Jared Woolley is a big defenseman who can make a decent first pass and the occasional tough play. I wouldn't call his puck play great, though, his skating is an issue, although it's okay for his size. And James Reeder was an important part of the top USHL team in Dubuque and was very good at the World Junior A Challenge. Reeder is a high-skill type who makes a lot of plays. What scouts like about him is that despite not being the tallest, he creates in the hard areas. His lack of NHL foot speed, which is suboptimal for his size, or he lacks NHL foot speed, which is suboptimal for his size. So that was Corey Pronman of The Athletic commenting on all four of the Kings draft picks, and he gave the Kings a C+ grade. Chris Peters from Flow Hockey said about the Kings 2014 draft class, Liam Greentree is an exciting prospect, but also can leave you wanting more sometimes. That said, his hockey sense and skill are high end, which is an easy thing to bet on. He also has size. The Kings also added goaltender Carter George with a under 18 gold and excellent technique despite his size disadvantages relative to his peers. Jared Woolley is a massive defenseman who was part of London's OHL championship team. And James Reeder is an undersized but aggressive forward who produces at a high clip in the USHL this past season. Greentree is the big prize, while the Kings added around the edges more with the rest of their class. Chris Peters of Flow Hockey gave the LA Kings a B- grade. And ESPN's Rachel Dory said about the Kings 2014 draft class, Liam Greentree, Carter George, and Jared Woolley are all intriguing prospects who provide value. Greentree brings a lot to the table as a modern power forward who should fit well with LA's roster going forward. George is someone the industry was high on, with many pointing out that he has all the tools to be a solid NHL goalie. Woolley is another player who flew under the radar because he played Junior B until midway through the season. He's expected to play a much larger role for the London Knights next season. The Kings should feel pretty good about their selections. Rachel Dory of ESPN gave the LA Kings a B grade. Now, if you have watched this show at all, and we've done some draft shows before, I've always said it's pretty ridiculous to grade a draft right after the draft. You never really know how a draft class is going to develop and work out until at least 5 years. And then that's really when you should give it a proper grade, but no one seems to do that. But we do it because we grade these drafts right after the draft because it's fun to speculate about and it's fun to create conversations. As my radio partner at Fox Sports Radio, Ben Maller, likes to say, they asked me to give opinions now, not 6 months from now. So with that in mind, I, in my unexpert opinion, would give the LA Kings a B grade. I like the mix of players that they selected. They get a solid all-around do-everything forward in Liam Greentree. By all accounts, he fell to them. They get a goalie with potential and helps the depth at that position in the organization. And a lot of people think he's at least a backup in the NHL at some point in his career. They get a huge physical defenseman who can certainly be a nasty player to play against. And that is certainly the trend right now in the NHL, is get those big hulking defensemen that can move. And it seems like that's the case with Jared Woolley. And they also get an undersized but speedy forward, kind of a nice mix of a little bit of everything. And it seems the Kings did get value with pretty much every pick, which is important when you only have 4 selections. All 4 players were ranked higher than the Kings actually ended up where they selected them. And if we're still around in 5 years, then we can look back on this draft class and actually give it a grade. But like I said, I think the Kings, I'll give them a solid B in this. And if you look at all the grades that are given out for people that do this after the draft, it's almost impossible to get an A grade if you don't have a pick in the top 10, because the thinking is a top 10 pick, you're probably going to get a legitimate NHL contributor and maybe a high-end player. Obviously, Macklin Celebrini for the Sharks went number 1. He's going to go in right away, start for them, and probably give them production right away. So it's hard not to give that draft class an A, because you're getting a high-end player who's going to contribute right away. If you're picking in the 20s like the Kings, obviously these guys are not coming in next year and helping the Kings right away. So how do you give that draft class an A? So for the Kings to get a B, and we saw a few different, we saw C+, B-, B. So I think you certainly can, see where the Kings are. I think it's pretty good when you get those kind of grades. Again, when you have picks that are in the bottom end of the draft. So again, I give the Kings a solid B. I like the picks. I like the mix. I like what's said about these guys going forward. So pretty exciting 2014 NHL draft for the LA Kings, where they got to have a first-round pick for the first time in a while. And hopefully we can see these guys develop soon. And they're already on display for the LA Kings out at the development camp, which we're going to get more into going forward in next week's or in tomorrow's episode. So looking forward to getting a report on that. And speaking of that, for you everydayers, those of you that listen to watch Locked On LA Kings every day, on Wednesday's show, Jared Shafran is going to join us. Now, he is one of the broadcasters, works for the Ontario Reign, but he is at Kings Development Camp. He's been there every day. That camp is running Monday through Wednesday, and he's going to join us Wednesday night for a firsthand report on how those players are looking. All 4 of the players that we talked about on today's show were at the development camp, so he's going to see them firsthand in action and can give us a report on how they did. And it's not just those players. Obviously, it's all the recent draft picks for the LA Kings and some other future stars as well. So looking forward to getting Jared Shafran's firsthand account of how all those prospects are looking at the Kings development camp. There is still 1 day to get out there and check it out if you can, with Wednesday's action being the final day of the development camp. I also talked to the Locked On Hockey Network's draft analyst. His name is Heidi Kalakash. He's joined us before. He does the Locked On NHL Prospects podcast, and he is going to join us next week to give us an even more in-depth look at the LA Kings draft. If you have any questions for him or for Jared Shafran coming up on Wednesday's show, I'd be more than happy to ask him anytime we have a guest. If you want to get a question into them, I'm more than happy to do that. Again, the email address for that is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. Also coming up on Thursday, which is July 4th, we are going to have a special holiday edition of Locked On LA Kings that I think we'll have some fun with. And then, of course, Friday is our usual Kings fan feedback show. Your chance to chime in on what the Kings did in the draft, what the Kings did in free agency, what you think the Kings lineup is going to look like for next season. How do you feel about the Kings for next season? It's your show, Friday, the Kings fan feedback show. And again, as always, the email address to get into email for any of our guests or the Friday feedback show, lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. You can always leave your comments as well in the YouTube episodes. We'd also love you to stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. And if you ever want to submit a question through social media, you can do that as well. That's going to do it for today's show. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, thanks for listening and watching. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.